there, ref. That she got the ball. Oh. As you can see, things have already gone out the window without Jack Hughes. He controls all this. But look, we are back. It's me, joined by the two guys from Kildare Spurs here, Colin and Jack, giving up their time yet again. You know, only in from work and already sitting down, ready to talk about Spurs and putting it nearly ahead of their family. So fair play to these guys and make sure you say thank you for their time. But, I mean, Colin, how are you keeping, first of all, my man? Keeping well?
Very well, thank you. The outlook has changed a teeny tiny bit on the back of some, well, it's never positive to be beaten, but some positivity from that performance last night. And hello to everybody tuning in.
Feels strange to sort of feel a bit optimistic after a defeat, to be honest with you. I'm not usually, don't usually feel like this, regardless of the opposition. I'm usually very grumpy, so it's a bit weird. Anyway, Jack, how are you keeping, my man?
Not too busy, very busy at the moment. Coming up to Christmas, we've a lot of work to get done, so that's keeping me occupied. The weeks are flying in, but Tottenham are putting a bit of a damper on my weekends at times, so they can pick that up. My life will be a lot happier.
Well, I mean, look, there's a good opportunity this weekend against Fulham, you know, but saying that our home record has been quite fit, so hopefully we can turn that around. You know, maybe Christmas does come early. We'll wait and see. But guys, just quickly, no Jack and Nicky tonight. It is Thanksgiving, so happy Thanksgiving out there to all of you in America and Canada that are celebrating it. And it's just going to be us three cracking on tonight. We've got a lot to talk about. You know, we can see the 2 goals from long range last night. That got me into doing a bit of research. We've actually conceded 9. You could maybe up it to 11 if you want to be very sort of clinical. That's a pattern that needs to stop. But there are plenty of positives. Randal Kolo Muani, Bergvall, Gray providing a bit of energy in there yesterday. So there's plenty of positives to talk about tonight. So look, we're going to start with, guys, I mean, Colin, we'll start with you now that the dust has settled on that defeat to PSG. What are your honest reflections on the performance? What major positives do you take away from that game moving forward?
Yeah, quite a few positives, but I do want them tempered against the context of we were so poor against Arsenal. So basically, turning up and kicking a football in the correct direction would have been an improvement over what we did against Arsenal. So, I think my overriding sensation was we gave it a go, which is really all I can ask for from any team.
Too well done to this point, though, just quickly, Colin. Should that not be the bare minimum?
It should be the bare minimum. It is exactly it. We should be the bare minimum. It's the minimum you should ask for, and the minimum that should be required from any team. Quite disappointing when it doesn't happen, as we experienced against Arsenal. But at least when you lose in this fashion, albeit quite a big scoreline, you can kind of still hold your head high. At least you gave it a go. At least they gave it a go, and at least you scored some goals, which recently have been, we certainly scored goals from play, which was a good thing to see. But I felt good after it, even though it was a defeat, because I felt that there might be life in the team. I was extremely worried after the showing against Arsenal that perhaps there was an anti-Frank vibe in the team, in the dressing room, because I have been concerned since I saw the Mickey Van de Ven and Spence walk off. I can't remember who we were playing against now. Chelsea, was it?
Chelsea,
yeah. So that's the type of thing I would look out for, to see what's the subtext to what's actually happening as reported in the press. So I've been concerned about that ever since, and our results have been kind of so up and down that you would worry: are some of those senior players or experienced quality players, if we're going to call them that, are they starting to doubt the system, starting to doubt Frank? But I felt we saw today a team that, or not today, yesterday, a team that was still playing for the manager because they were happier in what they were setting out to do. I do have a concern, though, that we, are with Frank at the moment, and I think I said this in one of the earlier podcasts we did, was I still have my doubts about him. I think we do swing wildly in managers. We had all-out attack in Ange, and now, he didn't care about the opposition. As he famously said, he wants them worrying about us. But in this, latest iteration of Spurs management, we seem to be worried about everybody else except us, which is a concern. But if you look at our November, matches so far, if a team comes at us and really, really gives us a go, we can't cope. Seems to be the you know, so we lost against Chelsea because they came at us. I swear there were 16 Chelsea players on the pitch that day. Copenhagen didn't come at us, and we rolled them over. Two terrible teams played against each other in Manchester United and Spurs, and that was just 2-2. Arsenal, as we saw, came at us once they got a grip on the game and burst our balloon, and that was a terrible result. And, you know, Paris, to be fair to them, when they did get into the swing of things later in the match, after we were a bit tired, we can see what they can do to us. But my overarching point there is that our ceiling doesn't seem to be getting any better under Frank, in my opinion. I think that's as good as we have played this season. I don't think it's the best we've played. I think we've probably played that well, probably against Copenhagen and maybe an earlier Premier League match, maybe against Leeds. But we don't seem to be pushing on. My real concern is how low the floor is. Like we don't seem to have a bottom at all. Like the efforts against Chelsea were abysmal. I think we got away with that on losing at 1-0. We saw how bad it was against Arsenal. We did kind of okay against United, and you know, I suppose it was a positive effort against PSG. But I'm convinced he doesn't know who his best 11 is. And I know he's managing the injuries and he's managing whatever else, but a lot of positives to take out of it, regardless of that, because we have seen good performances from Archie Gray and from Bergvall, and despite his mask, Muani, you know, he has been on an upward curve. You'd hope that he didn't put in that massive effort just because it's his parent club. But yeah, I'll let somebody else talk now. But basically, yeah, even though it was a defeat, I do have concerns, but I do have a lot of positive things I did take out of it.
I think if you're I think in general, I think, you know, you can understanding the magnitude of the task last night. PSG, probably the best team in world football. You know, it was always going to be an uphill battle. And I think, you know, it was always just a game where hopefully you don't get embarrassed and hopefully you can take some positives out of it moving forward. But maybe it also does allude to, if you're more cynical, maybe how far we've fallen, or, you know, how bad we are this season, that we're willing to sort of come away from a game like that and, you know, going, oh, we will take positives. But I also think it begs the question then, where was that, you know, where were them tactics and that effort against Arsenal, Chelsea? Was it there last night? Because PSG, to a degree, was a free hit in many regards. But also maybe it could allude to that, you know, the Telegraph put out a report there midweek that some of the players had gone to Frank about the approach, or sorry, after the North London Derby game, that some of the Tottenham players were asking Frank to change the approach, stop focusing so much on the opposition and start worrying about what we're going to do against teams. And, you know, he did make a few changes last night, and that maybe that could allude to that, maybe to your point, Colin, that some of these players maybe aren't having them so much. So that's an interesting thing that to look out for moving forward. But I mean, Jack, where are you at after last night's performance? Because it sort of does leave you begging the question, where was that against Arsenal? Where was that commitment, that fight, that hunger?
Yeah, I thought there's no doubt it was much bigger improvement than if you were to swap the two performances and we put that performance in against Arsenal and lost 5-3 and put the performance we did against Arsenal last night and lost 4-1. I think we'd probably be looking at things a lot more positively. We'd say, look, PSG, you sit back, but it's just that embarrassment of your two biggest rivals that we've had this season where we've hardly thrown a punch. Even the goal against Arsenal was like, it was 35 yards out. It wasn't any sort of well-worked team move. It was just a moment where Richarlison had a bit of quality. But I thought last night was probably the first time since the Man City match back in August where Frank sort of had one of those special operations, I think he called it, against PSG. I thought the formation, I think when it came out, I think everyone was sort of like, I don't know what he's doing here. There's no wingers and two up top. I think there was a lot of head scratching going on, but I think you saw straight away from the outset, having the three lads up top, all central, allowed us to press their two centre backs and their keeper. And I think while they played through it relatively easily, a bit more easily than you'd like, it did cause them problems. And I think especially with when we went direct and Richarlison and Kolo Muani were getting their head on the ball or something on the ball, there was someone there to pick up the second ball. Richarlison at the weekend, he'd get the ball and there'd be no one within 15 yards of him. And it's you're just expecting him to lose it. I think just getting someone close, even if he has a bad touch, it's 50-50 chance one of our players picks it up. And I think
100%. Yeah.
For all Frank's talk about Gilles, I think sometimes he loses the context of it, where a Gilles not necessarily 50-50. If Richarlison's there with three Arsenal players around him, that's not 50-50. That's 90-10. Like the majority of the time, he's going to come off second best. Whereas if you have 3 Tottenham players in the vicinity and there's only 2 PSG players, you're talking 60-40, 70-30 in our favour. So I think the context of where these drills are taking place and actually how it's done, I think, is important. But yeah, I thought actually the way he wanted to play, I still don't think it's perfect, and there's still issues, obviously. But yeah, I thought there was much improved, and I thought some of the small details, I thought Mickey taking those goal kicks, he was getting them about 70-80 yards on them. Like, it was 30 yards from the opposition goal.
It is a bit pub teamish, though, looking at it, isn't it? It's like Sunday League over here in Ireland sometimes.
Get him on the...
But I'm comparing it to Vicario taking those free kicks against Arsenal, and you just know he's not going to deliver any sort of quality on them. It's just Frank. One of the things about him was he was going to get the small details right, and I think it's something he's gotten completely wrong most of the time. And I think he did get them right last night, which I think is good. And I thought there was just more bravery. And while maybe you could argue the one where I think it was the third goal, Romero gave a hospital pass to Sarr. While you could say, oh, that's come from us being brave, Romero is an experienced player. He should know better than to pass the ball to Sarr. He was man-marked. He had time. He took 2 touches, I think, before. Just you don't even have to smash it into Rosie. Just send it long down the centre of the pitch. But I think that's maybe where some of our in-possession structures maybe aren't great, and that's obviously of concern. And I think some of his comments about... what did he say about, I want to fix the defence before the attack? Well, we're 4 months in and we've just conceded 9 goals in 2 games. So
2 games.
I don't want to know how long it's going to take him to fix the defence before he moves on to the attack. I think the two of them are intrinsically linked. And as we're learning in games when we have the ball, and it's panic stations when we have the ball and we're losing it, or we're not getting out of our own half, it just piles more pressure on the defence. If you keep the ball, rest the ball consistently and have the ball up the opposite end of the pitch, you don't have to do as much defending. Your defensive shape doesn't have to be perfect the whole time if you have the ball 60% of the time and it's up the opposite end of the pitch. So I think some stuff like that is lost on him. But then you're obviously, I think it was Colin you mentioned about Bergvall and Gray. I think that's a massive positive, having the two of them out on the pitch together. I can't get my head around how little he's used Gray this season, because whenever he has played, I think he's been great. Really impressive. Yeah, like he especially with the way we play, everything is about just fighting, basically. We're not maybe the most intricate team, and I think having guys like Gray, Bergvall, Sarr in there who have legs, I think as much as Bentancur before his ACL was very mobile, I think sometimes he lacks that bit of mobility. And as good as Paulinho is winning tackles, I think sometimes he struggles to actually cover the ground to make the tackle. He only has to wait for the player to come to him. So I think for all the tackles the two of them win, I think you're actually better off with the running of Gray, Bergvall, Sarr. Now, I'm not saying that the two of them never play again, but I think just to have at least one of them in most of the time, I think is a significant benefit.
I think it definitely provided a lot of energy yesterday. It meant we could get after their players. And, even Bergvall, even in the opening stages, the amount of runs he made down their right-hand side. And in fairness, this is where I give Thomas Frank a bit of credit. And this is what I said pre-game and in my predicted lineup as well, that Hakimi's out injured. They're playing a centre midfielder in there. There's a weakness there that I want to see us actually go after. And this is where I think Thomas Frank deserves a lot of credit, because after the Arsenal game, I was left very dejected in general, in terms of, like, I'm okay. I don't really care, back 5, back 4, whatever your preference is, fine. But it's actually the game plan and the instructions implemented in around it. And against Arsenal, I was really pissed off, because it felt like there was no game plan in possession, no game plan to try and turn the ball over and relieve pressure. And it just felt like we were set up to try and contain them for as long as we could. And we sort of went in there waving the white flag, and I was absolutely furious with Thomas Frank's instructions. And I sort of said, we can't do that again against PSG. I want to target that midfield. Although they're technically excellent, one thing they're not used to is robust physical players getting in and around them. And that's what they're not used to. And we got to use that to our advantage. And Thomas Frank done that yesterday. It was we seen a clear game plan of, we set out sort of with a, with the back 4 or whatever, and a bit defensive, but there was a clear game plan on how we're going to try and turn that ball over. And off the back of it, we created some chances and we looked better going forward because of that. And it seemed like there was a clear game plan when we had the ball. You seen players releasing forward from that midfield, the wing backs releasing forward, getting forward to support play, giving us options. Like you look at the Richarlison goal, came from the wing back having the ball, the 2 centre midfielders combining because they're allowed to get forward and work it. Muani putting it back across, Richarlison headering at home. It was a real team goal. And that's where I think Frank deserves a lot of credit, off the back of that. And I want to see more of that going forward, because realistically, last night, you can't really put it on Frank. I think the only thing you could maybe question is we had to go out and play like that in the second half if we wanted to get something out of it. The minute we were tiring and sitting off them, we were at their mercy. Could he have maybe made some subs earlier to freshen it up and keep that sort of intensity? I think it's a fair question to ask. But in general, I think the defeat actually comes down to last night. Individual errors, for instance, the one off the corner, Spence, near post. That's bread and butter. You got to be clear in that. He doesn't. Your point with Romero passing it into Papamat Sarr, regardless of instructions, experience has to come in at some point. You've got to realize that the guy's already up his hole waiting for that pass to come in to nick it off him. Bypass him. You've got two strikers up there. Put it long. Let one of them win it. Like, there's little things like that I think are on them players there last night. But in general, I can't really pull Thomas Frank out, and I just hope to see more of that going forward, because I think when I've been critical of him, people almost think that I want him out, and that's never what I've said. I've just said these are things he needs to implement if he wants to get supporters behind him, if he wants to try and go and win games of football. So credit where credit's due last night. Let's see if he can back it up against Fulham, because I know in his pre-match press conference today, sort of come out and said he would like to, that's our plan, to try and go and open up Fulham. Let's see whether we can go and replicate. But also to your point, Jack, about the 9 goals in 2 games, this is where I struggle a little bit as well, but I also think it's a problem because we haven't really had a game plan going forward. We haven't really worked on anything going forward. So it's coming back to bite us. At the start of the season, we conceded, I have the stat here, 1 second. We conceded 1 goal in our first 5 games. We've now conceded 9 in our last 2. And, since then first 5 games, the back line has been opened up more regularly. Teams are getting more chances on our goal. But I think that comes off the back of us not really having a game plan in possession, not really going and pressing balls. Because when you look at them first 5 games, we were a lot more aggressive out of possession, pressing teams, looking to turn over balls. And since then, he sort of dropped that. No one really knows why or understands why. And then that means when you don't have the ability to get out, pick up free kicks, throw-ins, corners, or get out, the pressure's coming one way, and eventually you're going to concede. And I think the fact that the defense isn't as stable as it once was is a direct problem of us not really having a game plan or working on anything going forward. So hopefully, that what we seen yesterday will progress moving forward. But I do want to get in and talk about maybe, I think we sort of covered it, but if anyone wants to really go on it, like what sort of specific aspects of last night's display do we need to see carried on moving forward against Fulham this weekend? But in general, just moving forward, was it the pressing, the intensity, the movement, the sort of in-game aggression? What are the fundamentals that we need to take moving forward? So that's Thomas Frank can survive in the job and build what he wants to build here.
Well, if I may, I certainly think us being a front foot or, being on the attack makes us a better team. For all the reasons I think you've very clearly articulated. You're not dealing with a lot. You're not trying to soak up a lot of pressure. I do think Thomas Frank is contributing to the kind of up and down nature of our performances by changing what he's doing, which again is perfectly articulated by you, Dave, that there's no kind of set game plan. And these footballers, of course, have a lot to think about when they're on the pitch, and what mode are we in now? Because one week we're pressing, another week we're sitting back, another time we're pressing, another time we're time wasting. It to me, there's never a clear game plan. And I think if I was a Spurs player, I would be very frustrated by the kind of lack of consideration for what we want to do, and you're overemphasizing what the opposition are going to do to us. And I just don't think it works. I think when we go on the front foot, and I think as fans, that's what we'd all like to see, regardless of almost regardless of what the outcome is, to see you having a go, which we've said is obviously just the minimum that you require. I do, the positives I want to take forward. I really enjoyed the injection of pace and impetus that Bergvall and Gray kind of gave us, because was it not Gray that did that little cheeky back heel for the first goal?
Bergvall done the back heel and Gray
to Gray, wasn't it? And then Gray chipped it over. I mean, how delicious was it? I was so excited watching that. I mean, it was just delicious football. And I feel sometimes when we have some of our other midfield squad members that they don't really express themselves or have the fearlessness in order to do something like that, because they're afraid of making mistakes, which Bergvall and Gray aren't. That's the joy of youth, which is well behind me now. And you do
behind me as well.
You do silly, fearless things because you're made of rubber and magic, and there's no consequence. You know what I mean? Not like now when you drink 2 pints and you've got a 17-day hangover. But I would love to keep that youth. It's not necessarily youth, but that kind of fearlessness and inventiveness and impetus in our midfield, because I do think it makes us better. And somebody like Richarlison feeds off that. Like when he's isolated, he's just a miserable lump, and you may as well have Emil Heskey up there. So I really want to keep that if we can. That kind of spirit, high spiritedness, which is great to see, and then it gives the opposition something to worry about. I mean, if you wanted to be overly positive, you can say, look, we're a team not in great form, yet we gave one of the greatest teams in Europe at the moment a run for their money. And don't forget, 5-3 looks bad, but it should have been 5-4 potentially, because, and this takes me neatly onto my next point, I think Romero had his worst game for us in God knows how long. I just don't think he had one of those games like he did against, I'm trying to remember who it was, he went racing out against last season, and he let it was against Newcastle, I think, and he let a guy in right behind and they scored. But he had just one of those games. I can't quite blame him for the penalty. I know he's trying wholeheartedly to get the ball.
I think his other 2 errors, I think he was, and we had conceded twice from that range already. I think he was desperate to get out to that.
He was desperate, but that's the thing, you see. He was desperate to get out, and another mistake occurs, and we concede another goal. And don't even get me started on, I like Vicario, but don't get me started about Vicario and penalties. I don't even think he knows what a penalty is. I've never seen him dive.
Has he ever even dived the right way?
I was just about to say that. Has he ever dived the right way? I like when we used to have penalties taken against us with our big keepers or your big name keepers or big personality keepers. You think at least they're going to make an effort. I just think he's one of those keepers that just picks a side and just dives. Is there any work gone into it? I just don't know. Anyway, that
doesn't seem like it.
Don't get me started on that. But all of this means nothing. It means absolutely nothing unless there's a decent showing against Fulham, because we just can't continue this kind of up and down form, good game in Europe or an average or really poor game in the Premier League, because that table, as I said a couple of weeks ago, has been really kind to us. We were all on 18 points when we played 10 or 11 games, and we were top of that pile by the grace of goal difference. We lose our match, everybody else wins around us, and now we're down in whatever position we're in now. We need to start winning games, or at least having a decent showing, so that that you can see signs that things are going to get better. Now, hopefully, this is the apex moment for Frank, where he's realized, hang on a minute, this isn't really working. And, he is learning on the job too. A lot of other stuff that I listen to, they go on and on and on about how he hasn't had to manage 2 games in a week before, but he has. He had Brentford in the Championship. They seem to play every other day in the Championship. So, I mean, I don't really accept that, but he is trying to learn. It's a big, big job. He seems to be firefighting something every other week in terms of injuries or results or whatever. So, I'm happy to give him the season. I'm not a Frank in or Frank out. Let's just see how he does. Give him the season. But it doesn't mean I can't have an opinion about how piss poor some of the performances have been. And if I'm being negative about it, doesn't mean I'm Frank out. If I'm being positive, doesn't mean I'm Frank in. The man needs a season. And then you take it in the context. Does he deserve another season? Or does he not? Because we cannot keep chopping and changing with such a turnover of managers. It's ridiculous. And that just breeds, how would you say, complacency in the squad, because they'll sit there and they'll say, do you know what? I don't have to make any effort, because when the results start to slide, that manager be gone. I'll collect my 80, 90, 200 grand a week. It doesn't really matter. You need to back the manager, or at least make it clear he's here for the long haul, whether that's actually true or not. But that needs to be the message. And I think he does need, to be fair to him, the full season to implement his ideas and maybe settle into the job himself. But one thing I will say about Frank is I do like his demeanor, and I think we could do, even as fans, with a bit of calm.
Seems unflappable.
Yeah, he does seem a little unflappable. It makes me very jealous, because inside, it's chaos. Yeah. I'm like a swan. I'm graceful on top, but inside there's just chaos. 2 little feet paddling away like there's no tomorrow. But I do think our club will benefit if he's given enough time to allow his personality infiltrate all the various levels and departments within the club, because he is calm, and that's what you need. You need calm. There's always another game. There's always going to be another injury. There's no point in having the kind of Ange Postecoglou grumpy, or Conte, intensity, or the madness of Jose Mourinho. We've been all around that. So, I mean, the closest thing that I can find, and I know that Pochettino was a bit emotional from time to time. I don't mind emotion; it makes us all human. But he was the closest I've seen to Frank in terms of he's reasonably stable. And the only time that Pochettino really fell off a cliff was when he knew, and he'd obviously been told he was not the manager, he was the head coach, and that broke his heart. As well as you can't have any funds and famously, however many transfer windows it was, without recruiting a player. So I think, in conclusion, I've rattled on now for quite some time. If we don't get a decent showing, I'm not saying we have to win against Fulham. If we don't get a decent showing, the results will come if we play good football. This is all pointless unless there's a decent showing against Fulham, when we go out and we attack and we die on our feet and we give the fans value for money.
Listening to what you're saying there about, giving them time. And I think, look, naturally, I think, the pressure is starting to pile on to sort of deliver some results to buy him that sort of time. But it will be actually very interesting to see if we do approach that point and results don't pick up and stuff, what the board what they actually do. Do they sort of stick by him, shift players out, bring players in January, or do they sack him and bring in another guy and do what they've done time and time again before? It'd be very actually interesting once they approach that point what they decide to do there, because the January window is only around the corner as well to a certain degree. So it'd be very interesting. But down to you, Jack. I mean, sorry, just quickly as well, Colin, you were saying about, the 2-game-a-week aspect and that he had that in the Championship. I think it's a fair point. Maybe not to the level of Champions League and Premier League, but to
totally, but he has done it before.
That fixture list in the Championship, he maybe has shown that he has the sort of know-how to accommodate that. I think for me, the biggest jump is actually, it's the same with Nuno. It's the same with, to a degree, Potter going to Chelsea. But a lot of their tactics usually are set up, and they usually have their success in the Premier League by stifling the opposition successfully and hitting them on the counter. When you're making a jump to a bigger club and you've got better players, you've got bigger expectations, more demand of on the front foot football, stuff like that. I think that's where someone like Nuno struggled to make the adaptation at Tottenham, and I think that's where Thomas Frank is struggling, but I'm hoping he's starting to learn his lessons to a certain degree, off the back of that PSG game, that this has to be the way moving forward. He still has time to learn that, because when I think back to Pochettino and why he maybe, although he struggled a little bit at the start, but maybe, why he sort of kicked on was because with Southampton, they were already playing that style and that way with that fitness regime and had success in the Premier League that way before he moved to Tottenham. So he didn't really have to change too much to a large degree in terms of tactics and the way he sees football, whereas Frank has to a large degree. And I think it'd be very interesting to see whether he learns that lesson or not, because ultimately that's what's going to, either keep him afloat at this level or, prove that he's not cut out for this level. But Jack, I mean, just quickly, despite the defeat last night, do you think it's restored some hope and belief again, or do you think it's another loss? It's piling on the pressure even more on Thomas Frank and the players.
Yeah, to be honest, from my perspective and my perspective alone, on Monday morning, I was so angry over the Arsenal result, and I said, I wanted him sacked. I'll be brutally honest, I wanted him gone. I thought that was such a spineless performance, and I said, he can get me back on board, but he has to show something. And I think what he did last night was he showed something. I didn't expect it to be perfect. I didn't expect us to win. I know in the Kildare group that you're both of you are in, there was predictions coming in before the game. There was a poll on it, and most of them were 5-0, 5-1, 4-0, 3-0. And I know one of the lads put 1-0 Tottenham, I think, and that was never really
even shame him.
Dahi, if you're listening, he says he never go against Tottenham. But in terms of, I thought what I saw last night was a bit of variety. I think one thing I would say over Frank's football is it's been very rigid so far, and you've kind of seen this. I wouldn't even say patterns of play, the same play basically over and over again, that long ball down the line or that long ball down the centre of the pitch to an isolated Richarlison with maybe one player near him that tries to pick up the second ball. I thought last night you saw, as bad as Romero was second half, I thought in the first half, I thought it was one of his actually best performances of the season. I thought for the first time in God knows how long, he was making line-breaking passes through the centre of the pitch, which tactically we just haven't even tried to do in really at any point this season. I think Burnley was probably the only time we really saw that. So I thought, and then other times as well, there was rotations in the midfield. You have 4 central midfield players, obviously Bentancur a bit deeper, Bergvall a bit further forward. I thought you saw a bit of rotation there, which when you have Bentancur and Paulinho as a double pivot, like they pass the ball and they stand still and they watch their pass and wait for the ball to come back to them in the exact same position they just pass it off from. I thought Gray, Bergvall last night, it was pass and move. And I think the basics of football, you're told don't watch your pass, you pass it and then you're on the move. Especially with the way most top teams these days,
push and run.
Yeah, they have like most teams have like man-to-man pressing systems. So you have a specific player marking a specific player, looking to press them, put pressure on them. If you rotate the players around, you can completely ruin a defensive system. So all it takes is one guy not tracking a runner, and the space opened up in the center of the pitch for someone to run through. And I think that's something a team like PSG do so well. Their 3 midfield players and even their wingers, they just rotate around each other. And next thing you know, you have Van de Ven in midfield with, I don't know, it could be Odegaard at centre back. Like that's such an ideal situation for a team to be in. And I think that's something maybe we haven't done. I think the sort of rigidity of the system has led to that, where it's sort of the 6 players just sitting there passing the ball between themselves. But yeah, I think having the energy of Gray and Bergvall, and as Colin, you said, just the bravery of them to get forward. You saw for that goal that Gray overlapped Bergvall. Like if that was Paulinho's not overlapping Javi Simmons if he's in the 10. Like that's just simply not going to happen. So I think just having that energy in there is just such a big thing. And I thought as well, Richarlison just
before you get on to the front line, can I ask you a question on the Gray and Bergvall? Because I agree with you, and this is something I've been screaming at all season, especially when we got balls into the, crossing positions. Why midfielders aren't really getting in to try and get on the end of it or pick up something. Even players just breaking forward to support the attack. Yeah. Last night we've seen that with Gray and Bergvall. Is that just down to them having the legs to do it, do you think? Or is partly some of that down to the instructions that it was sort of a free hit, to a degree? It's easier to be brave when your back's against the wall sometimes.
I think it's kind of both things. I guess if you pick Bentancur and Paulinho, that's not their game to do that. Whereas if you pick Gray and Bergvall, that is their game. So
yeah, fair.
Naturally, as a manager, you're going to play players to their strengths, I would hope. That's fairly natural to do that. So you tell those guys, use your energy, use your legs, get forward. And Sarr as well. So I think that's something that Sarr has been really underutilized for. He's really good at those late runs into the box, kind of those sorts of runs Lampard made famous. Now, I'm not saying he's going to score 30 goals a season, but 7 or 8 goals a season Sarr should be getting. I think he times his runs really, really well. And
I don't think he's been great recently, though, Jack.
No, I don't know what's going on with him, if he's not fit or something. But I think just having that players are marked in the box, and you have one fella come in and he doesn't get tracked by his runner. I think I can't remember. I was listening to some coach talk about it, and he said that a player came into him at halftime and said, "I made that run 10 times and no one found you." It's like, well, you're meant to make it 20 times, and one of them will find you. And it's those players that keep making those runs that get those 10 goals a season. Like, you're not going to get it off one. You have to make it every single time. And you hear commentators say he's gambled on that coming in. The best players, it's not a coincidence. Johnson, who I've been very critical of, he always gambles on that ball coming into the back post.
Yeah. Dele Alli used to do it.
Yeah. Dele was the best example we've seen of that. And I think Sarr has that ability, but for whatever reason, just isn't utilised enough. I think you get him in that sort of box-to-box role. Maybe not as a number 10. I think maybe for bigger games he's suited to that. But yeah, I think he's got the capability to do that. And I think Bergvall and Gray can develop into that sort of player. I see a lot of Declan Rice in Archie Gray. I think he just moves the exact same way. He's got legs. He can put his foot in for a tackle. He can carry the ball forward. I just think he's such a complete footballer, and he's 19 years of age. He's hopefully only going to get better. And eventually I think he's just going to be a top player. And Yeah, as I was saying before, Richarlison, I thought, geez, I haven't seen Richarlison play like that since August. I thought he was
3
absolutely
goals in
great.
3 games now.
Yeah, I think
he's a
the United game, I thought he was absolutely terrible. He could have scored a hat trick in that game, and I would have said he was awful. And Arsenal, just a tough day at the office for everyone. I think he scored an unbelievable goal. He struggled though in that, but last night I think Richarlison, I think, was possibly born in the wrong era. If he played in the 4-4-2 era, where he was in a strike partnership, I think you're talking about him being regarded as a much better player. And a lot of the time he did at Everton playing a 4-4-2. Him and Calvert-Lewin were the two up top. And both of them were scoring 10 plus goals a season for a couple of years. Like, I think he's just one of those guys that when he gets isolated, I don't know if he panics or he just doesn't have the technique, but he's not able for it. Whenever he plays with the two up top, it was same against the last PSG game. I thought he was much better. But yeah, I'll just wrap up now. I know I'm rambling on a bit here, but just
quick hour, Jack.
Yeah, quick hour. I thought Frank's comments, I thought post game, I really liked. I was really worried he was going to come out of the game and say, "Oh, we're really disappointed to concede 5 goals. We can't be that reckless the way we played." He actually came out and said, "That's more like how we want to play."
Identity.
And I think that's actually as much as conceding 5 goals is never a good thing. I was very worried he was going to basically just revert back to what we'd seen before, because he'd go, "Oh, well, look, we conceded 5 goals." I remember Mourinho famously doing that. People were complaining about not getting attacking football. He went out and played attacking football, lost 5-4 to Everton in the Cup. And it was like, see what happens when you play attacking football. And it was nearly like he threw the game to prove a point.
Yeah.
And I was really happy that Frank was able to say there was positive bits in there, and it was maybe individual errors and just sort of playing a very good team. Like 2 of those Vitinha goals, just most teams, just Fulham don't have players that can do that. And Arsenal obviously have Eze, who is one of the best players around at doing it. So most weeks you won't end up in situations like that. So I think that's
well, hold that thought, because that does bring me on to my next talking point about the amount of goals we've conceded from actually outside the area. I know you say not many people have Vitinha's ability, but we've conceded quite a bit from outside the box. But to your point about Richarlison, I think it's because he's got another player around him, so that even if he does maybe have that loose touch, someone else picks it up, and then all of a sudden he looks like a genius rather than a donkey.
Yeah.
And I think that's been his biggest problem this season, is that when we have gone long to him, there's been no one around within a 10-15 yard radius of the guy. And when you're battling 2 to 3 guys, it's very hard to sort of hold on to that ball. And, I think, look, I wonder how many people be calling for us to play a 2 up front, that old school 2 up front, because when you look back at the 2 games against PSG, the best team in the world, we laid a glove on them, sort of playing that sort of way. You look at the way Muani and Richarlison both scored last night, both sort of feeding off each other. We were able to get hold of the ball and get up at times. And I think maybe there could be a call for that moving forward. Be interesting to see what happens.
Just on that point, though, I think there's something that you have to bear in mind is PSG are not a physical side at all. As good of a football side as they are, like coming up Fulham at the weekend, like Calvin Bassey, you don't want to go up against him physically. Like, he might not be the best footballer in the world, but he'll bully you. I remember last season he threw Romero to the floor and with one arm nearly. Like, he's just such a physical player. I think most Premier League teams have very physical defenders and very physical midfielders. Just the type of league it is. I think maybe for the European games, the 2 up top is something where we can hurt teams, but I don't know how effective it'll be in the Premier League.
Yeah. No, that's a fair point.
And I think the style of play of our opposition determines a lot about how we'll play. Like I've been saying, we're doing reasonably well in Europe because teams are a little bit more open and they don't play with the same physical aggression that, say, Chelsea did against us. So I don't think we work well under that kind of physical pressure. So giving away a player to have in the front line when you need somebody back a bit further doing a bit of graft mightn't be to our advantage in these other games, but we'll see how it goes. Just in reference to his post-match and his post-match comments, and I know he's a nice guy and all, and it does worry me from time to time that maybe he's too nice. Like him talking about a PSG player winning the Ballon d'Or, what a player kind of thing. like, he's not employed by PSG. That does get under my skin. I understand why he says it, because he's probably a gentleman. But at the end of the day, he has to understand he's not standing there as Thomas Frank. He's standing there as Thomas Frank, Tottenham Hotspur manager. The last thing I want to hear him talking about is how good the opposition were, particularly when we were, and no bones about it, on the end of a hiding. We conceded 5 goals. So, I mean, that really irritated the life out of me.
Yeah. In fairness, like someone like Pep does that the whole time. I remember last season, Man City beat Southampton, who were one of the worst Premier League teams I've ever seen. They beat them 1-0. They had a hard time against them. And he comes out and goes, oh, they're one of the best teams in the league. Just to basically a load of fluff to make them sound like their bad performance wasn't as bad as it was. So I think maybe, while Frank comes across as maybe he's being a bit nice there, maybe that is.
But he's done it before, Jack. He said it about Spurs when he was Brentford manager.
Yeah,
famously.
I think it's a preservation thing more than anything else. He's basically saying, well, look at the players they have versus the players we have. I think it's one of those things. I think it's the same as blaming the referee or blaming something. You need to kind of look outwards rather than inwards sometimes, I think, as a manager, to save yourself.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just old school. It just, to me, at my age, you never give an inch. You just never, and you're being paid by your employers to do a job. And you certainly do not say things like that, in my opinion.
Yeah. Look, I'm sort of with you on that one, Colin. The amount of glaze he gives, even in pre-match press conferences, how great they are, what they're good at. It almost, like, for instance, Wolves almost gave them the confidence coming into the game when they were void of confidence. And I think sometimes it can backfire against you, to a certain degree. But saying that, when he said Eze who, it sort of motivated the guy who went and banged a hat-trick against us. So it sort of can work against you sometimes. That
just don't talk about them at all.
But where it doesn't help, Colin, is when the performances are reflecting the praise that he's given the opposition beforehand. And Spurs fans are looking at some of the games that we should be competing better in and winning, going, well, no wonder why we're playing like that, when what he's saying in the pre-match press conference, you can sort of correlate it. But I am with you. I prefer him just to focus on Tottenham and, what we're going to do to hurt the opposition rather than glaze them. But look, we take this from Dermotron. He says, Frank needs to be settled on a style of play so he and the players know what to do. Fulham, Newcastle, Brentford are big games ahead. Come on, you Spurs. Look, I think they're big games in terms of the narrative around Thomas Frank, to be honest with you. There's a lot of people that still have question marks whether he's the right guy. A lot of other people says he is. I think the next 3 games will sort of settle down that noise, to be honest with you, if he comes out the right side of it. If he doesn't, I think it's only going to be ramped up a hell of a lot more. But in terms of the style of play, look, like I said, I'm okay with, from game to game, pinpointing weaknesses of the oppositions or trying to set up against certain strengths of theirs. But there has to be some sort of plan on how we're going to lay our glove on the opposition. And that's lacked for large parts of this season. If he can bring that, then people can see what we're trying to do. And I think he'll get a lot more leeway. And then more people start talking about the quality in and around the squad and stuff like that, Dermo. But big up, really appreciate support, my man. We got James. 2 big problems seem to be retreat too deep and give up the 18-yard line. This is structural, not a player problem. And Richie only seems to work with a partner up top, more or less saying what Jack says there. Random says last night will only be worthwhile if we show similar intent versus Fulham, whatever the formation. Absolutely spot on. And King Hodges says, good evening. I assume Paulinho starts versus Fulham, in which case I would advocate pairing him with Bergvall and Simmons in the number 10. That leaves the issue of who plays left wing and whether we stick with Udeberg. Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Could you even play Gray in there, and push Bergvall a bit further up to sort of provide energy to get after their back line, or put Sarr in there. But yeah, look, and I think Udeberg probably will be the player to come in on left wing. I do think that if you look at the majority selections down that side, it is clear that I think Thomas Frank is starting to maybe prefer Wilson Udeberg, but I do think, he's probably showing the most promise out of all the options and combinations we've played down there. But look, I know, Jack, you were saying that we don't, not every team possesses the quality of Vitinha and these goals from the edge of the box. But them 2 goals yesterday, it got me thinking and got me into doing some research. How many have we actually conceded from the edge of the box? Because I can pick out loads of games off the top of my memory, but I wanted to go through every game and just actually get the right tally. So Spurs have now conceded 9 goals from the edge of our own box. Now, there's 2 debatable I left out, 1 more against Arsenal and 1 more against Bodo Glimt. But You know, you go back to it, 2 versus PSG last night, 1 in the Super Cup against them, 1 versus Brighton, 1 versus Bodo Glimt, 2 versus Aston Villa, 2 versus Arsenal. Now, last season at Brentford, no goalkeeper faced more long-range shots than Flecken, and no keeper made more saves from distance. With that in mind, who is truly responsible for this reoccurring sort of pattern? Is it Thomas Frank and the tactical step up, the fact that it was something that happened at Brentford and continuing at Spurs? Is that maybe a flaw in his tactics? Or is it down to the midfield double pivot, not sensing the danger and getting out and closing it down? Or is it just the fact that Flecken made all them saves at Brentford, the fact that Vicario just maybe not be good enough at dealing from long-range shots from distance? Because it's something that other teams are going to pick up on. You'll start seeing them keep players in around the edge of the box, waiting to fire it.
Yeah, I think it's actually all three of those things, to be honest with you. But I think the most prominent of them, I would argue, is probably Thomas Frank. As you've said, that was the case at Brentford. I think if you sit deep, a team isn't going to break you down with ease, you would hope. And naturally, one way to try and break a team down is to have a few shots from range, because naturally, either one of them goes in, maybe you get a set piece from it, keeper spills the ball out, and even if none of those things happen, the opposition know that you're going to be willing to shoot from range, and they're probably more inclined to push out a little bit, which creates space on its own. So I think there's a lot of factors to go into that. And I think listening to Thomas Frank before he joined us, he did a few of those sort of pieces where he sits down there with the tactics board and talks about different philosophies he had. And one thing stuck with me that he said, basically shots from range are low percentage plays, and that he doesn't believe that they're something you should use regularly. He said he used Fabio Carvalho at Brentford as an example, and he actually did one a couple of weeks ago where he talked about Javi as the example. He said, listen, I'm never going to tell a player not to shoot, but I'm going to tell them not to do it consistently. So I wonder if that seeps into the players, that he's nearly telling the players, well, there's very little threat from a long shot. And they're going, well, he's telling us not to shoot from range, so perhaps maybe we encourage the opposition to shoot from range. Now, perhaps that's not the case, and he's telling them to close them down. And I
think you're right, though. I think it's a direct correlation on how he sees it. You know, if he sees it one way going forward, he probably sees it the other way defensively.
Yeah, I think there is a philosophical issue there. I think, as I said, there's lots of reasons teams shoot from distance. You're not guaranteed. It's not necessarily to think the shot is going to go in. It's just to create some sort of chaos, and maybe it's the case of where you take 3 of them throughout the game, and in the 90th minute, everyone's tired and someone doesn't get out to you quickly, keeper spills it and defenders are asleep and someone taps it in, or you get a corner or something from it. I think there's a lot of reasons to shoot from distance as a way to break a side down. And as we saw at the weekend, Richarlison shoot from distance, just you can sometimes just catch a keeper out when they're not expecting it. And I think Vicario's maybe shown in some of the games this season where I thought the Morgan Rogers goal against Aston Villa, I know a lot of people said it was a good strike. That ball didn't go in the corner. I don't think Vicario was set for that. I didn't think his positioning was great. And it's not that I think he should have saved it. I think his positioning gave him no chance because he was too far over to his near post, which meant if it went anywhere near the corner on the opposite side, I think it was a goal. And I think if he's positioned better and set for that, I think he probably just tips it over the bar, and you hope then you can defend a set piece. But yeah, I think there is a lot of factors to go into it. But the Arsenal game in particular, letting Eze, of all players, shoot from the edge of the box. Eze basically had a 70 million value because of how good he was at shooting from 15 to 25 yards out. That's his party piece. He's going to take a touch to get it out of his feet and hit one into the top or bottom corner. That's what Eze does. It's his signature move. And we let him, I think, even outside the hat-trick, I think he had 1 or 2 where Vicario actually saved him. So we just didn't learn from it. And I think having, 7 defensive players on the pitch, including Paulinho and Bentancur, who were supposedly these great defensive midfielders, and they just don't get out to block it. I think that's just not good enough. Yeah.
I would argue.
Sorry. No, sorry, Dave. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I would argue, I have seen Paulinho make more attempt to get out and block more of them than maybe Rodrigo Bentancur, to be fair. But
Bentancur at the weekend was pathetic for 2 of those Eze goals.
Same against Aston Villa.
He was nowhere to be seen. I think he's living off past glories before his ACL. I think at the moment, I think he's adding very little to the team at the moment.
We're going to have to wait till next week to have a debate about Bentancur because Jack's very pro Bentancur. So I'll make sure I bring that question up next week. You can both sort of. But I think you've got. I think you're absolutely spot on. I think you hit the nail on the head there, Jack. That I do think it. It is maybe a weakness in Frank's tactics and something that he's happy to give up because of the way he sees it going forward. And, when it's happened at Brentford as well, again, I think it sort of stems to that. Again, he has no problem giving up the space on the edge of the box. But he wasn't caught out as much by it at Brentford because Flecken was pulling off the save. So, I mean, Colin, I know you've already highlighted Vicario. I'm guessing maybe you're not his biggest fan. Do you think maybe he is a part of that issue? Because at the end of the day, I can understand it. He doesn't want to give up the 8. He doesn't want to give up space in the box. So he's sort of flooding that with the 2 extra pivot players. He's more happy to give it up around the box. And I presume he's probably hoping that Vicario can pull off more saves than what he is currently from distance.
Yeah, I do. I think Vicario has his weaknesses. I do think he is a good keeper. I don't think he's a great keeper. I do like his attitude and I do like the fighting spirit that he brings to the team. But ultimately, he's not going to get us, in my opinion, top 3. He's just probably not that good. But what I was going to say before I rudely cut across you was there was a very interesting piece. I normally don't like listening to Jamie Carragher because he just melts my head. But he did do a very, very interesting piece because I suppose I see football very emotionally. But he was seeing it as a systemic thing. And one thing I'd never noticed before, which he pointed out really, really well against what Spurs are doing against Arsenal was, and it does, when I reflect on this and what he had to say, it does seem to me that it is a systemic flaw that teams are exposing in Frank's setup, which is we're trying to push players out wide, and it does leave a gap in the middle, which Arsenal exposed over and over and over again. And actually, it was really interesting to watch when he picked out the 4 or 5 plays, and you can actually see the Arsenal team deciding when to go. So they actually recycle the ball a couple of times, and then they think, all right, they're in the right position now. So they actually push down the right-hand side. 4 or 5 players come out towards this Arsenal player to try and stop that attack down one of the wings. And it leaves all this space in behind directly in front of goal, which is where we conceded most of those, either shots or goals. And it was kind of the same thing against PSG. Guys in the D giving up a lot of, conceding a lot of space to guys in the D to have a shot. So I know the one that we against PSG was just top corner. 2 keepers aren't saving that. So I don't think I blame Vicario. The goals are massive. I mean, and these are professional players. If you give them enough time, they're going to put it in the stamp every single time. So I think it's teams that are working out at this level how to play against us because of Frank's system that tries to push players out or push the opposition team out left or right and overload that. And then it just leaves a lot of space. And when you're playing against somebody as advanced, as it pains me to say, as Arsenal, who are very pragmatic, very set in their ways, and a well-executed and well-drilled team, they can just pick you off, which they did numerous times. So I think I think Franks needs to look at how does he avoid that situation reoccurring. And to me, one of them is attack. It's simple. Like if you're sitting back waiting to be picked off, which was what caused most of my horror against that in that match against Arsenal, because it was just so flippin' obvious that we were going to wait and until we met our maker at some point. The axe was just going to fall, and it did. And then our bubble was burst, and there was no way back. So he has to address that. Whether that's by changing the system, I don't know. But maybe by changing the personnel, so you've got more of a forward thinking, like we've talked about already, instead of having Bentancur and Paulinia, who are more defensive minded and better at breaking up play. You've got the Bergvalls and the Archie Grays, who just bring that little bit of freshness and impetus and dare I say it, legs, which I don't have anymore.
Yeah, look, and it'd be interesting, to see whether it is Paulinia, Bentancur, problem specifically that maybe they're just comfortable dropping in beside the centre backs and sort of allowing team space around the edge of the box, and they're just not willing to get out, or they don't sense the danger. And, if you were to put, say, a Bergvall, a Gray, or a Sarr in there, would that continue to happen? But I think there's also a case to say, you look at Vicario, he's not the most intimidating sort of goalkeeper. He doesn't fill out the goals. you would
No.
argue. I think he looks very small in them goals, and I think it also invites players to shoot from distance because they know. I think if they can wrap it in and round to one of the corners, I think they've got a good chance of scoring from to that degree. So, and I also think we have to have a massive conversation around Vicario come the summer. I wonder, would Thomas Frank put himself in for a new goalkeeper? The fact that he's got Van Ven taking goal kicks, Vicario is suspect usually, from set pieces, so we're having to set up accordingly to, make sure that he's not, being targeted and stuff like that. And then also the shots from the edge of the box. The problems are starting to mount on the guy, and I just wonder, is that something that Frank could be looking at come the summer? I think it's interesting, but look, it definitely is something that's in Frank's system, but I think he relies, like he did on Flecking, to pull off them saves. Raya before that, and I wonder, is Vicario maybe exposing it or highlighting it a hell of a lot more? But it is something that teams are it's well documented, and I think it's something that teams will look to do more of, put players in around the edge of the box, and I'd argue it'd be smart for them to tell one of these double pivots to sit in and around the edge of the box just so that they're close to it when it does happen. We've got this from Paul Markey from Dublin. Big up.
Sorry, Dave. Just one quick point there on Vicario, just before we move on from that. I think outside of the actual goals that you've included, what was it, 9 of them, and then potentially 11 with 2 included.
Yeah.
Against Leeds, there was a shot taken from distance that he spilled, and that led to a goal as well. So
I
think
didn't include that. I was being kind.
Yeah. Oh, you didn't include, or you did include that?
Didn't.
No. Yeah. So that it wasn't directly from the shot, but it was. It did come as a result.
It was an error leading to a goal.
Yeah,
and 12 then.
Yeah, and then also just to note on the potential new keeper, you look at the 3 keepers Frank had at Brentford in Raya, Flecken, and then obviously Kelleher. He didn't get to use Kelleher, but he was a Frank signing. Like the 3 of them, they were good footballing goalkeepers, and the way Frank wants to play is to invite teams onto you, knocking the ball around the back, and then you have the option to go long or to clip the ball out wide. And I think Vicario's accuracy on any sort of pass just isn't beneficial to that. So I think comparing him to those 3, I just don't think he's not a Frank goalkeeper, I don't think.
Yeah. I think you can see that by looking at him. I think it is something that I think Frank will instruct Tottenham to go and look at in the summer. And I know, look, Vicario, he's not the worst of them. I think he's one of the world's best shot stoppers, 1v1, to be honest with you. But you look at Arsenal, Ramsdale, people sort of saying, well, why are they getting rid? They don't need him, Ramsdale. But look at the massive improvements he's made in terms of mentality in big games, coming out, collecting set pieces, not as shaky, more consistency and stuff like that. And I just wonder, are Tottenham maybe approaching that point with Guglielmo Vicario? We've got a couple of quick chats, here. We'll take these, and then we'll have a quick conversation around Randal Kolo Muani. Paul Markey says shots from outside the box is the responsibility of the midfielders. Why would we change from last night's formation? We need Kolo on a permanent stay 4-4-2. Look, in terms of the shots from outside the box, I definitely agree with you in terms of that. I think Bentancur and Paulinho could be more aware of it, to get out there and close it down and stop them shots. But the reason why I say is that maybe instructions that we don't have anyone there and they get in and fill up that space in around the box, because if it happened at Brentford where teams were allowed a lot of shots from outside the box, more than most, and it's continuing at Tottenham, and the common denominator is Thomas Frank, but I do believe the midfielders could make more of an effort, especially Bentancur. At least Paulinho, I have seen him get out there and put his bollocks on the line. Bentancur, I always see reacting way too late to that danger. It's just like he doesn't want to put his body on the line, which is a bit of a problem. And, to one of these boys' points here, would a Bergvall, a Sarr, a Gray be more determined to get out there and close it down? Quite possibly. He also says, why would we change from last night's formation? We need Kolo on a permanent stay 4-4-2. Yeah, look, I think maybe he could do a 4-4-2 and play 2 wingers, instead of maybe two more centre midfielders like he did last night. And Paul Markey also follows up and says 4-4-2 gives you more control in game, both defensively and offensively. Vic and Rodri are fine to the negative vibes. I'm not sure. Maybe clarify that that last bit, Paul Markey.
I think it's meant to be far too negative, I would assume.
So he's basically saying Vicario and Rodrigo Bentancur are
far too negative.
No, I think he's saying they're
I
good
think it's the other way around. I think he's saying
negative.
they're fine. We're too negative.
Yeah.
Oh.
But I mean, Jack, look, why don't you put the case to your Bentancur point then forward for Paul Markey? Because, you know, maybe I did cut it off a little, maybe saving it for next week when Jack's here to defend his guy. But you know, what is it? Because you're not the only one. Let's be brutally honest. I think it's actually a very popular opinion out there.
I think if we were in a different situation where maybe Gray and Bergvall weren't two 19-year-olds who were still developing as players, I think Bentancur would be absolutely fine to have as a rotation option. But I think it's the fact that he's a nailed-on starter, and just I think sometimes he goes hiding from the ball when he's under pressure. Like you saw last night, Sarr took the ball under pressure off Romero when obviously he lost the ball. But that's the sort of bravery I want to see from my midfielders, is that even when they don't want the ball, they still show for it. And I think that means that it gives an opposition team something to think about. I think Bentancur doesn't do that enough. I think he lost a lot of his legs that he did have before his ACL injury. I think he covered ground. And that burst of pace, I remember he used to get the ball on the edge of the box and just charge forward. He just glide past players. And I just think, not his fault, but he just lost it with that ACL injury. And I think that was his sort of USP that he had. I think that was where he excelled. Talking about Eze with like his shot from outside the box, Bentancur's burst of pace past the player, I think that was his signature move, and his legs. And I just think the two of them are gone. I think his passing's far too safe. I just think everything about him, I just think he's average. He's okay at everything, and I just don't think he excels in any area, which is fine as a squad player. But if you're a nailed-on starter, I just don't think that's good enough. And I think you look at every other team's midfielders that are in that position. Like you have Gravenberch, Caicedo, trying to think who else there. Obviously, Man City have a ton of options. Arsenal have Rice and Zubamendi. Like that's like just not on the same level. I just don't think it's even comparable. So I think I wouldn't have given him a new contract. I would have kept him around for the season and moved him on at the end of the season. But
even in his pomp, I don't think he was comparable to some of those names you've mentioned there. You know,
no, I think for Conte's system, I think he was absolutely perfect. That two-man midfield. You look at Man United's midfield, I think they lack like a prime Bentancur that can just cover ground and will just work his socks off and have that bit of burst of pace and will just move the ball quickly. I think if you're trying to play a team that maybe has a bit more of a slow build up and you're looking to nearly invite the opposition onto, I think Bentancur is just too safe. I think when he's working instinctively, I think he actually is a lot better. And I think you see glimpses of the odd time where he gets the ball under pressure and he has quick feet still, but I think he just struggles with that mental side.
He might come back. You know, he might come back. I mean, some players just take a long time to recover after an ACL.
Yeah, I'd love to see it.
But two, isn't he?
No, just the one.
I think since he's come back, he's been deployed in a complete different position, though. You know, under Conte, it was him and Højbjerg, but he was the one that was clearly allowed to get forward by Højbjerg. Postecoglou played much deeper on the pitch, and so does Thomas Frank. And I wonder how much of it is down to instructions with Bentancur, because at times, some of the stuff you're speaking about there, I have seen him do. I have seen him get around the pitch and get after players. I have seen him play the ball forward. It's just nowhere near consistent enough. And when I think back to what Thomas Frank said when he was asked about Bergvall about playing in that position earlier on in the season, one of the big things he said is he runs out too much. And I just wonder, does he sort of, is that more instruction related with Rodrigo Bentancur to sit in there beside Paulini and sort of protect that back line rather than allowing him that sort of freedom? But, you know, to your point, off the back of an ACL injury, I've had a lot of players that could never get back and reach that level that they were at before that and say that. So there could be that element to it. But Paul Markey, why don't you get in the comments and let us know, maybe the positives for Rodrigo Bentancur on that one. And then, Colin, we'll get you to answer this one quickly here as well. 4-4-2 gives you more control in the game, both defensively and offensively. Would you agree with Paul Markey? We're almost going back full circle to 90s and early 2000s football here. Prime Premier League, some would argue.
Yeah, here we go. Get the Robbie Fowlers out. I don't think there's a straight answer to that one. I don't think there's a kind of a yes or a no. I felt, against an open-ish team like PSG or even the likes of Copenhagen in Europe, it's going to work very well. I think it's definitely worth a shout in the short term because, as we've seen, Richie does work much better with somebody up beside him. So if we want to maximise Richie's abilities to score, he is on a hot streak at the moment. Perhaps we need to compromise elsewhere. But I think with the pressure and the physicality of the Premier League, particularly, like, I mean, there's no. I hate to retread old ground. There's no easy games in the Premier League. So, playing against Fulham is not going to be a walk in the park by any stretch of the imagination. So perhaps you're going to need to pack out the midfield in order to counter what they're going to give you. And you can't afford the luxury of having two up top. Or if you're brave, do you go with two up top and see how it goes? But at the moment, I don't have any faith in Frank to call it right, because I think he's called it wrong more often than not, and then changed it throughout the match. Because I still, like I said, still don't think he knows his best 11. Don't think he has faith in a lot of the players that are there. But I agree with the point that the viewer makes. I do think it does give you more control, but will that ultimately give you the benefit of a match-winning moment? I'm not convinced. Like, there's, if 4-4-2 worked and delivered results, everyone would do it. It's a bit like the set piece thing is a big thing now, because so many teams are so good at defending and packing out their defenses. You need to find another way around it, which is why throw-ins and set pieces are in vogue, because you can control most elements of that sequence of play. And you can get in and around the box without having to work the ball into the box. You're just dumping it in either from a long throw or from a corner, and you're taking your chances. And, I suppose it's 50-50 if the ball is delivered correctly. But I think that's why you're seeing an awful lot of teams working on their set pieces to maximize the return from those, because Premier League defenses are so bliggly hard to break down these days. So, yeah. Is it going to give you more control? Yes, but will that turn into match-winning performances and match-winning moments? I'm not so sure.
I think where Paul Markey's maybe coming from as well is the fact that we scored 3 goals against, one of the world's best teams. Is that maybe Paul, maybe you're trying to focus on the attacking element of it in terms of how we maximize the best out of, because one of our problems recently has been scoring goals, and I think that's maybe where Paul Markey's coming from. But I definitely understand where Colin's coming from. And to be honest with you, I don't think Frank will end up going 4-4-2. I'll be surprised if he does.
We haven't had a problem scoring goals away from home, which is where we were. Like, I mean, all credit to PSG. Okay, I respect the fact that they are one of the current holders, one of the greatest teams in Europe. Okay, but we haven't had a problem on the road. We just haven't. We've had a problem at home, which is where we're going to play Fulham.
Well, we're making games to the opposition. That's what
this is exactly my point. I don't trust him to get it right. I think he's, potentially he's fearful. And I don't think the scoring 3 goals, well, first of all, contextually, we haven't had a problem scoring goals on the road. But I don't think the 3 that we've scored against PSG was because we played 2 up top. I mean, I know it helps, because obviously Kolo's goal was from a mistake in the back, and he's capitalized, and he wouldn't be there if he wasn't part of the 2. But at the end of the day, I think it's more to do with how much driving we're doing from midfield, where we don't do either at home or either when we've got the double pivot up the linea, and not to to glaze, which is a great term, by the way. I'm learning every day. Bergvall and Gray, but I do think that they offered that impetus to get forward and that freshness, as I touched on earlier. And I think it's more to do with that than it is to do with with having 2 up top.
I agree. I think, you can't get players forward playing 1 up top. You just need to give them the license to do so. And, you can get extra bodies in the box. Like, that first goal, even if you played it calm and your instruction was to get in the box, you could easily replicate that. You don't have to have 2 up top. But look, I like the thinking, Paul Markey. You want to try and win games, you want to score goals, and that's what we're all in it for at the end of the day. And Faz Rafar says, will Dom and Kulu solve our problem if they return before Xmas? And this is another thing, just quickly, I'm worried about Faz Rafar, that everyone's sort of hanging their hopes on the injuries. If them players come back into the same system we played against Arsenal, Chelsea, some of the other games recently, Monaco, teams like that, they're not going to make any sort of difference whatsoever. You're going to see the exact same shit happening. If you bring them in the way we tried to play against Man City, Burnley earlier on in the season, PSG the other night, then yeah, they will come in and make a difference, hopefully, and make you look a bit better. Maybe some of the attacking moves where we're a bit sloppy in possession, maybe that tightens up a little bit. But it literally all comes down to the instructions of the manager on that and what he sort of wants to get out of them on that one, Faz Radfar. And then Paul Markey comes back in and says, Rodri is an 8 who can play 6. We never play him correctly. 2, when you control midfield, you win games. And I think that is an element, that is an argument that maybe I'm trying to bring to the fore on that one, Paul. That is, with Postecoglou, he turned him into a 6. Frank is sort of deploying him and deploying him in the same sort of position on the pitch. Because to be fair to Bentancur, back against Conte, we've seen him get forward, we've seen him affect games, we've seen him score goals, we've seen him play forward. So he can do it. But again, let me know, Paul Mark, your thoughts on this. How much of it is down to the ACL and maybe he just can't get back to them levels that he once was, and that's why these managers are maybe playing him a bit deeper? Let me know on that one, Paul Markey. But I am conscious that I did say I'd keep you guys for a quick hour, and we are slightly running over, which is good. It means we're having good discussion. But we'll end it off on this one then, Jack, and we'll let you guys go, because I also want to go and watch Shamrock Rovers play. But Randal Kolo Muani scored twice and assisted 1 last night. Do you think this is a once-off inspired by facing his former club, or do you expect more performances like this from him going forward? Can he be that sort of consistent goal scorer that we've been crying out for since Harry Kane?
I was kind of just waiting for this performance, to be honest. What I'd seen at Juventus, I thought obviously not watching them every week, but just from the highlights, he scored 8 goals in 16 league games. That's a 1-2 strike record. What's that? 20 goals in a season, and if you play every league game, he's not short of ability to score goals. He had no preseason really. His future was up in the air. He came in, missed a couple of weeks straight away, breaks his jaw then. So he's not really had a run of games. And I thought last night, he was absolutely excellent. And I think anytime I've seen him, he, unlike Richarlison, he can be isolated and still figure something out. I think he's just got that bit of technical quality on top of his physical ability. So I think it was just a matter of time for that. I think he just had to get the first one. I think I'd expect him now to get 10 or 15 between now and the end of the season in all competitions, provided he can stay fit. I think he's a brilliant player, to be honest, from what I've seen. He just he's an all-rounder is what I would say. And he gives you an option out wide as well, as we've seen kind of in moments in games as well. So I just think he's a really astute signing. And I don't really understand the stuff of we're looking at a striker in January. I think you have him and then you're getting Solanke back and you have Richarlison as your third choice striker. I think you might not have the perfect starting striker, but you're not going to fix that problem in January. That's something to fix in the summer when kind of those top players get in the move. It's very rare you see some top player make a move in January. So I think I really like Kolo Muani and I'm very positive for him, especially if he can get Solanke back. That'll hopefully push him to get even better with a bit of competition there.
Absolutely. DB, we're absolutely loving the Liverpool demise, by the way, because these boys will know as much as I do. We are surrounded by them fuckers and they're intolerable. Absolutely intolerable. When they're winning,
agree more.
When they're losing, they're crying. They just don't stop crying. It just winds me up all the time. So I'm absolutely loving it. In fact, I'm messaging them all saying slot in and giving them all the good reasons why they should keep them. And to be honest with you, I know it winds them up and affects their day, and that's what I love most about it. But Jack, back to Kolo Muani. I mean, look, I sort of agree with what you had to say there. I was sort of waiting for this to happen. I thought Copenhagen would have been the night. Finishing on the night sort of let him down. But I think last night against PSG, he's shown that if we provide him the chances, we do actually have an option up front that can take them and that will put them away. But it's not only the goal scoring exploits; it's just a general all-round play. He's not one of them strikers that consistently just rely on chances being created for him. That second goal last night, you can get him the ball, he can create his own, and he can link up with others, and that's what you want from your forward guy at the end of the day. I think all round, if we can get this guy going, if we can get him, fit and keep putting him out there consistently and get the right players in and around them, I think, Thomas Frank can make something out of our attacking options. Like I've said, I don't believe, I know we could do with some quality in certain areas, but in general, I don't think that was the whole problem recently. I do think a lot of it was instruction related to different combinations and stuff like that. But I think off the back of last night, when a player steps up like that in a big game, which we haven't had for a while, for, a player like that in the forward line stepping up in a big game at Tottenham, I think then he's got to look at that, build around that, in my opinion, and hopefully the forward player will come. But Colin, just we'll end off with you on your say on Kolo Muani, and then we'll call it an evening. I mean, Muani, can he be the guy to come in and start scoring goals regularly for us? Do you have belief in him now after last night?
I think I had belief in him before last night. I think he's been on an upward curve. I think he's been terribly unlucky with injury, has been well covered. And I think I would encourage anybody who's watching him and expecting him to throw in the same performance against Fulham if he gets picked that he has done against PSG. I would just caution to maybe temper the optimism there, because I don't think he is on the upward curve, but he'll have peaked against a kind of open defence. And I'm not saying PSG are open, but he's not going to get smashed by a Premier League centre half, in Paris, like he will do playing against Fulham. So I think he's showing, for me, all the right signs. I think he will come good. He looks very athletic. And again, this is very old school. But when I see him on the pitch and, just kind of watching his body language and his expressions, he looks up for it.
Yeah.
He actually looks up for it. When I'm looking at him...
to Richie, right?
It's a funny thing. Like, I see the same thing in Xavi. I see Xavi being a bit more youthful, a bit more frustrated and getting annoyed because he gets knocked off the ball or his passes aren't working out. And I see that kind of youthful frustration in him. But when you're looking at Muani, he's definitely up for it. So if he can find his feet, forgive the pun, in the Premier League, we could absolutely have a player. My other small concern is that he's just turned it on because it's PSG is his parent club. So apologies, Jack, if you covered that already while I was off dealing with my old man bladder. But he certainly feels like he's coming good. But my expectations are not in line with his performance at PSG. They're in line with his previous performances in the Premier League. So I think he had a very good night against PSG, and I'm hoping he just goes on to have a good day against or good night against Fulham. Is my hopeful expectation. But I think he's heading in the right direction, and I'm optimistic he will turn out to be a good player. And I am really looking forward to getting Solanke back. I really am.
Well, it'd be nice to have a bit of extra competition there, because I think that only benefits everybody. Like when I grew up, we used to have 4 strikers, all of nearly similar equal ability. Usually you put out 2, they perform because the pressure's on them, and I'd love to be able to get back to something similar like that at Tottenham Hotspur. But I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of he always looks up for it when you select them. Even if we're not great in possession, he's running his fucking nuts off to try and, just get a hold of something. And, I think you're absolutely spot on in, with that observation for sure. And then Dropkick, your teacher says injury affects sides. Maddison will look similar to Xavi because no one is making runs and balls being knocked over the head. People need to realize this. And I think you're absolutely spot on. Look, I think, of course, it can affect you in terms of some of the quality and stuff like that, right? But, I think everyone is sort of just pinning their hopes on the injured players coming back and making a massive difference. But many people forget some of these players were part of the problem last season. Most fans, before he actually went on that run last season from preseason onwards, were happy to maybe cash in on Kulu that summer. Maddison, although he turned up in games last year, there was large periods where Postecoglou didn't select them, because of attitude problems and stuff like that. And if you, like I said, RST, it's the same as I was saying earlier on to Faz Radford. You bring these players back into a system we deployed against Arsenal, Chelsea, teams like that, forget about it. There's no difference they can't make. You employ them in a team, like we did against PSG, Man City, where you're aggressive going after the ball. You can get them on the ball in space with players running off them. Then, of course, they can come back in and make a massive difference in terms of you might see us, the amount of attacks, that breakaways that we get where passes are under hit behind opponents rather than in front of them to continue on that momentum. Shit like that. I think that sort of aspect will improve to a certain degree. But big up RST, really appreciate the support. But
so Dave, just on that point, I really liked the comparison between Maddison and Xavi. I think you could probably group Eze and a couple of the other number 10s we are linked as well into that group of players. But I think Kulusevski, is a bit different. I think Kulusevski's best attribute is his running power. I think that you saw from Sarr early on the season, that ability to cover ground and carry the ball. And I think Kulusevski would probably be quite good at picking up those second balls. Now, you don't know for certain until you put him in the team. But I think Kulusevski maybe will be able to actually fix that. But I think, Maddison, I think, could be struggling in the same way Xavi is. He's not a particularly good athlete. He's not particularly physical. He's a footballer. Like, he's not
well, he might be a YouTuber. That's what I'm a bit worried about, Maddison's return. How much of his head is in football and how much is towards being a YouTuber, a personality, a media person?
Yeah. In fairness, Frank he kept him in that leadership group as one of the vice captains. So I'm under the impression that Frank likes what he hears from him. And you saw the way Maddison reacted that Europa League final. Hugging Son, the two of them were both in tears. I think he's just delighted to be at this club for whatever reason. He seemed to have his heart set on us. And I think, while he's not perfect, he's injury prone. Sometimes he's inconsistent. I think having that connection to players like him who really genuinely do care and have that bit of personality. I don't think he has that media trained sort of aspect about him. I think he speaks from the heart, I think, when he talks, rather than giving the sort of robot answers, the politically correct ones. So I think I like that sort of personality.
Yeah. Just not to be too negative, Dave. I've finished on too negative a note. But I think people are right not to put a lot of stock in these players coming back and fixing all our problems. I really think the only player we miss is Kulu and then Solanke. And I think the rest we can do without, so to speak, right? Because I do have a thought process in the back of my head. Sorry about this one now. That maybe we are a little bit deluded about the quality of our squad. Because truthfully, where are we now versus where we were 2 years ago when we started under Ange? We had 10 amazing games, and since then it's been shocking. I mean, it's been shocking. And I know we won the European Cup, but it was a reasonably easy run. Okay. And we got there probably on the strength of Ange's personality and his own determination, which he transferred to the players. So there are doubts in the back of my mind because we're consistently poorish.
Underperforming,
underperforming. And we have done for a long time, which is another thing that Frank said that annoyed me that he shouldn't have said. Remember, this team finished 17th. We fucking know that, right? Okay, we're all acutely aware of that. But maybe we're all sitting here thinking things can get better because we're just trying to see the good in it. But perhaps this whole squad just isn't good enough. And that's on the club. That's not on Frank. That's on the recruitment team. It's not on Frank. You know, Frank can't make a silk purse from a sow's ear. But maybe they're just simply not good enough.
Yeah, well, look, I think this season will certainly tell us that, right? Different manager, different approach. If the same shit keeps happening, I think then you can maybe definitely point to that for sure. Jack, did you want to say that in there?
Yeah, just a quick point on this. I think the squad is sort of like it's a mix and match of sort of different profiles of players that were bought for different managers. I think that sort of constant jumping back and forth from a pragmatic to sort of, well, I wouldn't even say Jan was progressive. He was just a bit mental, to be honest.
All out attack.
I just think that sort of constant switching of profile of managers just doesn't help that at all. I think a lot of the players are very good, but we just have so many profiles missing in our squad. Like, we don't have a particularly good passer in the middle of the park, which I just think that's something that's a non-negotiable, in all honesty. And then up until this year, we didn't really have a winger that could take anyone on. I think those two things are just something that you're pissing into the wind. If you don't have those two profiles in your squad, you're not really going to have any capability to be a top side without those two profiles. And up until we had Kudus, I think we didn't have either.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. Absolutely spot on. Well, guys, I did promise you a quick hour. It's been a quick hour and a half, so I do apologize on that one. I hopefully you don't get in too much trouble off your partners, and if you do, you can just blame me. It's no problem. I want to say a massive thank you to all you guys at home that are tuning in, listening. I'm gathering you're liking this, because the more we do it, the more people are listening, the more people are engaging and stuff like that. So, fair play to you guys at home, and make sure you say thank you to the likes of Colin and Jack here, who, by the way, give up their free time, on a Thursday, coming home from work to be here and have conversations and create this show. So fair play to them on that one.
It's free therapy, Dave.
Let's talk about your feelings.
I think that's what actually sort of got me into this to a degree, because I didn't even know about YouTube until my dad really sort of introduced me into Tottenham YouTube. I was walking into his house one day, I had Chris Cowling on doing a stadium update. So I didn't even know that side existed until he showed me. And then I remember watching, it was Jose Mourinho against Newcastle. I think we got hammered and I was furious. And I was listening to We're Talking TV and disagreeing with a lot of what people had to say. So I said, you know what, I'll go on for myself and give my opinion. Just went from there. And it's just, I think if we were winning games, to be honest, we were back where we were under Pochettino, I wouldn't even be here today. I think a lot of it is just down to the therapy, to be quite honest with you. Because if we were winning games, I wouldn't be on here. I just wouldn't. Under Pochettino, I wasn't even searching for what other people were saying. And, stuff like that.
In fairness, Flav from the Fighting Cock says that their viewership or their listening numbers tank when we lose games, that people just want to hear the positivity. He said under Pochettino, that was as many listeners as we ever had.
Yeah. Absolutely. Flav, by the way, is another one I need to reach out and get him on again. It's been a while since he's been on, actually. I really like Flav. I really like that podcast in general, actually.
Yeah,
it's very, very good.
It is a good one.
Flav's a top man.
Listen, we can't talk about other podcasts. We're being... This is the Irish Hotspurs time. We won't be talking about any other podcasts.
Well, if people do want more therapy, if the people are searching for it, go and check them out.
You can find it on their own time. We're not going to start promoting other people's podcasts. You come here to the home of the Irish Hotspur and you enjoy this content and this content only.
I appreciate that. But guys, on your way out, please, everyone, smash that like button. If you are new, smash the subscribe. And if you think it's worthy and you think other people need to listen to the discussion, make sure you share it. Thank you to Dermot, Paul Markey as well a couple of times, and also Faz Radfar for going the extra mile and showing a bit of support towards the channel today. We appreciate you all. Again, thank you to Colin and Jack. We'll be back here same time, same day next week. Same day next week because we're playing Newcastle on Tuesday. And we'll see you then. As always, come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.